lot of it is similar to the West. You know, social media is booming. Video is one of the most popular media types. I would say the one thing that makes Japan slightly different is just the presence and importance of offline media, which is, you know, things like billboards or like advertising, traditional advertising, television, even radio is all those channels are still being very actively used in Japan.
Digital is important, digital is the future, but in Japan they will still maintain their affinity with print media. In fact, there's a really interesting statistic that by the end of this year and early next year, Japan will become the #1 print consumption in the world. It will overtake America.
The amount of mailers I get here in my letterbox is ridiculous. Like how handfuls of them I have to throw away every day.
Yeah, it's much more of a dominant thing than in a lot of other countries, which can be confusing, I think, to a lot of companies that are coming in.
I think the biggest misconception for many people is that Japan, 127 million or so people, but it's one of the oldest populations in the world. So many people that don't know about Japan know about brands like Sony and, you know, all the electronic brands, for example, and then just think that Japan is very technologically advanced.
I think they use a lot of modern technologies, and then they still continue to use slightly more old-fashioned and outdated technologies, which maybe aren't used as much internationally anymore.
So there are more senior people who are more comfortable with traditional media, and also when it comes to accepting new technology and new stuff, sometimes Japan is surprisingly slow and conservative. Say a very funny example we always mention is they are still using faxing machine these days.
And then TV is still very much a key media, whereas outside of Japan, streaming and digital is growing massively. Here in Japan, though, it's still not as popular. So yeah, I think for the better part, if you compare Japan to the rest of the world, it's probably 10 to 15 years actually behind. But not behind in a negative sense, just it's still maintaining what was probably popular 10 years ago in Europe or America.
Like smartphone started very, very late and slowly, surprisingly in Japan, which is often seen as a technology pioneer. That again was partly because of the skewed towards senior population, partly because people were so comfortable with the feature phone, the traditional phones. So like iPhone and everything didn't really break as fast as in other markets.
But you know, older people don't want to feel old, right? They want to feel young. So you can still have them embrace digital. It's just how you make that happen. And you know, if you look at some of the phone makers here, so you know, they're encouraging people to use smartphones, but the screens and displays are just bigger, the buttons are bigger. So, you know, there's certain localization that you have to do to make digital media a success.
Tatsächlich sind ganze 90% der japanischen Bevölkerung online und über die Hälfte davon benutzt regelmäßig soziale Netzwerke. Im Durchschnitt sollen Japaner jeden Tag 1 Stunde und 48 Minuten damit verbringen, ihr Smartphone zu benutzen. Und dafür gibt es einen guten Grund.
One thing you can notice here is in the trains it's extremely quiet. So basically it's not socially acceptable if you talk very loudly in a train and everyone is supposed to be quiet. So either like keep it to yourself, read a book, or like just stare at your cell phone.
A lot of people are doing really long commutes, like an hour and a half one way. But I would say the majority of people are probably somewhere around 45 minutes to an hour one way. So that's a lot of time to do nothing. So that's one of the reasons why trains are just covered in advertisements, you know, like they know that some people aren't using their device at all. Some people are reading a book. Some people are sleeping, which is a very interesting cultural thing.
I spend a lot of time on the train, kind of like going back and forth to work, so they're mobile first kind of country and iPhone first, and so they've, I think penetration for phone internet was way higher than I guess normal PCs back in the day, so it was a very unique market at that time.
The smartphone proliferation is crazy. Mobile proliferation including like flip phones and stuff like that, is also crazy. So, you know, you get a lot of people who are using their devices. So it's a huge mistake to not be attempting to reach those people on their devices, basically.
Japan definitely is very mobile driven. I always like to say that whatever we do, we generally, should be mobile driven anyway.
I mean, considering proliferation of smartphones and mobile in this market, considering Japan has, I believe, the number 3 right now, I'm not totally sure, but considering the amazingly high network speeds in Japan, it's just the digital environment is just ripe for digital marketing. So it's very confusing to us that some companies don't want to invest in it. But it's growing, it's definitely growing, it's getting there.
Aber wie gut sind Unternehmen im digitalen Bereich aufgestellt? Ist digitale Transformation schon richtig in Japan angekommen?
Well, digital no, they have no idea what to do. I think organization is very hard.
The biggest thing I think is just the process. Japan is very much about process and time. So whereas Western society we tend to be more quick decision makers, or at least doing whatever. Whereas the Japanese are very calculated and very planned and etc. 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 So yeah, I think when I first came here, and even now, being patient is key.
Yeah, I still think, very far behind.
Yeah.
And everything they're far behind. Whatever you're going to say, they're pretty much far behind on everything.
There's this tendency that of rejecting automation. Simply put, if this process, even if it's slow and not efficient, if it can secure a job for 200 people, we don't want to change that.
Japanese HR policy is that they rotate every 5-6 years. So they're not really good at anything. Yeah. So they can't make decisions, right? So I guess when it comes to digital transformation, there's not really anyone informed to drive decisions and understand how that works organizationally. So when you're talking about governance, or process, or operating model, or just trying to implement digital processes and understanding how you're going to use data and your MDM and kind of integrate with all these systems to use it in the right way. No one really knows how to do it. No one can lead that in terms of what's right for that organization.
So if you look at our clients, there isn't a single client that says, I want to do digital. I would rather you take my print spend and move me to digital.
Yeah, because they can't take responsibility, right? Because in the next 3 years they got to rotate again. And so if they make a mistake, they don't get to rotate somewhere good. They get rotated to somewhere they don't want to go. So they try to kind of like lay low and kind of just do what the last guy did for 5 years, and just do it good enough so that they can move to the next thing.
Well, the culture is definitely different. Japanese companies have very unique styles of working when it comes to, say, decision-making process. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
In Japan, they don't. There's no really integrated marketing people. Like digital is digital, kind of like corporate affairs is corporate affairs, advertising is advertising, product is product, and they're not like very integrated at all.
I think when it comes to digital marketing, Japanese companies are not always on the cutting edge of a practice, but they will spend the time to get it right, and they will eventually master it. And they'll generally adapt it for a Japanese audience and want to explore or connect it with existing practices in Japan. The Olympics is coming up now. There's a lot of attention on foreign visitors, particularly, so there's sort of an openness right now around, well, how can we cater things to foreigners or outside ideas? So right now there's a lot of, I think, openness and uptake of new ideas.
I think Japan actually, if it could embrace a bit more international marketing practices, I think it would have a lot more success. Whether that's shifting from print to digital, whether it's embracing more global type processes, like you say, like content marketing, or maybe using influencers less or more, I don't know. But yeah, it's a pretty cool place.